Hello, in this video I will attempt to demonstrate something obvious. Teamwork exists in modern organizations as well as remote work. Let's examine this with European data, which I currently have. Things may be different in other geographic areas, meaning that the statistics I am presenting may not reflect the reality of Latin America, North America, Africa, Asia, or other regions. I will present you with aggregated data from the European Union, but notable differences exist between countries. The countries in the north are not the same as those in the south, and those in the middle also have differences. Simply understand this as something that gives us a global perspective, but if you want specific data, more detailed statistics are available for each region. The second comment I want to make before showing you a couple of graphs is that this data corresponds to the year 2015, which is before the pandemic. Some may say it was long ago, but perhaps that is why they are more representative. There may have been some changes in the last 2 or 3 years, especially in remote work, but I believe that we are currently seeing that many of the things that emerged at that time were not here to stay, and we are returning to previous levels. Therefore, it can still be a representative starting point for reality in the coming years. It is true that, over time, some of these things will change. Let's start with teamwork. Keep in mind that this is about Europe in the year 2015. Not much has changed since then. 60% of workers worked in teams, while only 40% worked on individual tasks for their entire workday. Of the 60% who worked in teams, they worked in groups or teams with varying levels of autonomy. There were those with a high level of autonomy, which consisted of fewer people, and those with no independence, such as those who work in an assembly line with a hierarchical superior who gives orders and instructions, and others who simply execute those orders without much autonomy. This group accounts for 20% of workers. The majority falls in the category of moderate independence. Another critical detail in this graph is that it breaks down the percentage of people who work only in a single group, the majority of those who work in a team. Some people work in more complex and diverse environments because they work in multiple teams simultaneously. This can generate different needs and demands for these individuals. Remote work also exists, at least it did in Europe in 2015. It clearly has less incidence than teamwork but has a trend towards expansion. The figures for teamwork have remained stable, but remote work figures are expected to continue to increase and stabilize at some point in the future. It is difficult to predict when this point of stabilization will be reached. I have divided the data in this graph because it may be interesting to show how the incidence of remote work or different remote work modalities varies depending on the professional profiles or sectors in which people work. Specific sectors or professional profiles tend to use remote tools more than others. The graph also separates two types of situations, represented in blue, which is usually the longer line except in sectors like education. This indicates using platforms or tools for remote meetings, team collaboration, or virtualized individual work, but that can be done from your workplace. This means that you can go to your office, factory, or university workplace and connect via a video conferencing application to work with a team once you are in your office. So, you would fall under this blue category because you use remote connection tools. Still, you can use them from your office while traveling on a train or plane, during a working visit at a client's facilities, or to connect with your headquarters, other branches, clients, or other resources. So, the blue section indicates the use of remote tools from the workplace or other locations. In contrast, the orange area represents people who work remotely, typically from home or non-traditional centers, meaning that they spend most of their time working in locations that are not their office or their organization's headquarters. If we take the total number of people working in Europe represented by the sample, which is quite large and from which we are getting the data, in 2015, almost 10% of people used video conferencing or other remote work tools, such as calling or virtual collaboration. I haven't found any statistics that combine these two variables. Who uses remote work tools for team collaboration? Someone may work remotely, but only on individual tasks that don't involve team collaboration, and when they go to the office for face-to-face interactions, that's the only time they work as part of a team. Or they may use both remote and in-person collaboration interchangeably, but I don't have any statistics or data on this. So I can share my personal experience on this matter with you. So, based on my intuition and how I've been working in the last few weeks or months, I estimate that about 35% of my team meetings are in person, while 65% are remote. Only about 5% of the meetings are hybrid, meaning that some team members are present in person while others are connected remotely. It's important to note that this is my personal experience and not a statistically representative sample. I further broke down my intuition by reflecting on the teams I've met within the last month. I've labeled each team with a tag, and some of them have had more frequent and longer meetings during the month, while others have had only occasional and brief encounters. It's important to note that this breakdown is specific to this month and may change in other months. I have noted which teams I have met in person and with which I have had remote meetings. As you can see, there are some repeated cards because there are teams with which I have had remote and in-person meetings this month. And also, in one of the teams, I had a hybrid meeting. To further clarify this exercise, I've been thinking, are these estimates correct, or am I going to end up, as it turns out, with a very well-planned agenda? My agenda is well-planned and all my meetings are scheduled on it. If there's no note on my agenda, the meeting didn't happen. That's for sure. It's true that I don't note all my personal tasks or work areas in my agenda. However, all the meetings for any of my essential teams, in fact any meeting I have, is on my agenda. So I've been reviewing my agenda for the last 4 weeks and all the events I've had, meetings with my teams or with any team I participate in, and I've been adding up the hours. 2 hours for one meeting, 4 hours for another, and in the end my intuition was right. I didn't trust it much, but it turns out my gut feeling was pretty accurate. And they matched up quite well with some modifications. In other words, I've been more present than I thought in these last 4 weeks. At least this exercise allowed me to see that when I work in a team, the meetings are mostly remote in my case. In your case, you can do a similar exercise and see how it turns out. I think that at this moment you can confirm things that you already know deep down. However, having some evidence and data to contrast in a specific context and environment can be helpful.